So when Aileen and I met the other day, we talked about the great problem when no one asks questions at the end. So it's not a problem if you don't ask questions at the end, but we thought it might be nice to invite people to jump in. Particularly, I haven't been the interlocutor person for a while. So if I fail to pick Aileen up on some very interesting things or something you want to hear more about, if you stick up your hand, within reason, you don't want questions every 5 seconds, we'd love to hear from the audience, please. So I'm very happy to be here because I think these works are phenomenal and they're full of humanity and tenderness and they're sort of aggressive and fun. And I think that's a fairly singular combination. And yeah, so hi, thank you for inviting me. One of the things that we talked about that I was interested in hearing a bit more about is you sort of mentioned the idea that getting hung up on developing as a painter was somehow a kind of an inhibition or a problem that you needed to overcome.
Yeah, big time. I think I struggled with that. I didn't understand what that meant, like development meant. And I think I had some notion in my head that development meant going in a straight line and getting better and better and better. And at some point I kind of realized through talking about the mechanics of painting and what painting can do, and that it's not linear and that development can go like in all different kinds of directions. And that freed me up to sort of, yeah, I guess develop an attitude where I felt like it didn't really I didn't have to think about making things to be good. Like, or questioning what is a good exhibition or a good show. And
so when you're working towards like a body of work like this, and were you working on all of these paintings simultaneously, or is it sort of one at a time? Or
yeah, exactly. So I set them up so there's like multiple canvases ready to go, and then they're layers. So while one layer is drying or one painting, also it gives me a chance to just leave one for ages, because I can get, if I do something and I think it's really like successful, like a bottom layer or something, I get really attached to it and think, oh, it's like, you know, I don't want to ruin it. Yeah, but that's not like, and in talking about development, like actually ruining things is development, and like wrecking things is development, and getting into a problem in a painting, like development is kind of whatever I've wanted it to be.
And do you have a sense of where you want the works to go, do you think, when you're starting? Is it like, I was thinking about you, because you talked about the paintings in terms of making the work alive for yourself. And got this slightly, I hope it's not offensive, notion of you as a kind of a Dr. Frankenstein, and that there's a moment when you're kind of cackling with joy because the work has finally come to life in some way. Or so is that something that you think there is a kind of moment when you know it's here, the creature's alive, and you love it, and you're sort of full of joy? Or is it a sort of longer, slower process and kind of recognizing that here it is now,
I think it's
and they're talking?
Both. Yeah, a bit of both.
Okay.
A bit of like, I think sometimes when I'm working, I can't stop looking at something, and then I know that something is good, but I might not know for ages. I need space. And then other times it just takes months, and I'm painting over something, and then I end up taking it off the canvas and I make another painting, and it becomes what the other one was supposed to be. So I don't think the question of finishing things is a funny one, because I would be more inclined to approach painting in a non-arrival kind of way, where I kind of don't want things to necessarily be that whole, especially with these paintings. I wasn't trying to be like, these are all going to be really whole and self-contained. I kind of wanted to open everything up. So the question of when these paintings were finished is very different for each one, I think. Yeah,
you did talk about that phrase, you used that phrase, never arriving, which I thought was worked really well in a way, that they're all not arriving together or something. And you talked about the works being open and kind of unstable. And uncontained in a certain way. So I was wondering, because sometimes, I mean, we talked about, it's funny actually, because the paintings, and I hope this doesn't sound pat, but the paintings are very noisy. And you talked about we'll talk about the title of the show in a minute, maybe, and the title of some of the paintings. But for such, so you said something that I think anyone who's made paintings has said at some point or another, that's very hard to talk about painting.
Yeah.
And yet you've made all of these paintings that are sort of about talking.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering, is there anything to poke at there? Is that something you could talk about? Or maybe talk about the obverse and talk about what you don't like about paintings that are stable and composed?
I think I don't, in the one hand, I don't like how it makes me feel as a maker, that it's not satisfying to me to approach a painting with that end point or something. Like, I feel quite, there's kind of an urgency, I think, when I'm painting I don't want them to all be the same, you know?
Yeah.
So it's kind of a weird thing to say that I want them all to be open and kind of like stretched out. And that's coming from a place of like, it does connect to talking about stuff. I think I struggle with that, and it's still hard to talk about painting. And I would hope that the paintings can kind of talk for me, in a way. And the title of the show, Wet Talk, comes from a title of a painting I made last year that just fit the show really well. And that is kind of about, like talking. And the paintings are kind of chatty and noisy, like the dogs, these 3 dogs are the chatty ones, the noisy ones. The figures that are covered are kind of muffled and covered. And then this painting could be listening. I mean, that's kind of a straightforward read of them, but I don't want to shut it down for people. So if they see something else, then that's cool. But Wet Talk is connected to, of course, the paint being wet and being something that's malleable, and it can, I guess, speak in a way or make an image that is audible. And it is hard to talk about painting, but we're talking about it, so I don't know.
And then one of the other things that you were talking about that seemed a little bit like maybe that's where it's a kind of point of tension, and maybe I'm going back to the kind of fantasy of development, is you're talking about sort of letting go of the idea of technique and embracing sort of a notion of nerve. And I was just wondering if you wanted, is nerve the opposite of tension, or am I missing the point there somehow?
It's like every time I paint, I have to continuously try to let go. There's so much doubt, and I'm quite fearful actually when it comes to approaching things. And maybe tension is the opposite of nerve. Maybe
or technique, I meant, sorry.
Or
actually,
technique. Yeah, technique is, not wholly interesting to me, I guess. It's like, that's part of what I'm doing. Like, I'm obviously able to draw a picture, and but it's more interesting for me to kind of work against myself, or kind of make them to unravel them in a way that I'm not trying to go with classical logistics of a picture. It's like, there's tension in the figuration and the gesture. There's tension with the colors, and I'm not really satisfied with them unless the figures are under pressure. Yeah. Technique is, depending on how you look at it, I think would be the thing that I do want to blow open, maybe, and approach that as, that's just something that's there, I guess. But in the letting go, maybe I am letting go of, I don't want things to necessarily look technically good. I want them to look like there might be an internal psychology rather than a really well-drawn figure.
Sure. I mean, that's one of the things that I find really compelling about them, is there's a lot of colour in them, but I'd never think that they were happy paintings. They're sort of bright and lively and exciting, but there's a lot of sort of anxiety or something in them.
Yeah.
And now I feel like I don't know how to put an end to this question. One thing that you did say, and maybe I'm putting you on the spot, so just say F off if you want.
Okay, go for it.
When we were looking at them the other day, you said, and that's me, very casually, and gestured to that painting.
This one?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Did I say that?
Yeah. You said, you know, these are the yapping dogs.
Yeah.
And you said, that's me. And then this is the one with the huge ears and it's
Yeah.
listening.
Yeah.
And I deliberately didn't ask you because I thought, that's great. I have to find out what that means.
Well,
But
yeah, I mean, that's really funny. I'm clearly hiding.
you're muffled.
I'm muffled, yeah. Yeah.
Will I leave this alone or
I'm
do you want to
muffling
talk about
myself.
it?
I mean, it is kind of interesting if you're thinking about, like, I mean, maybe I am muffled. I don't know. I think that I'm more comfortable painting than I am talking about them. So
Yeah.
I would rather hide under a sheet than spend all my days talking about them. I would rather be painting, yeah.
And the forms, the decision making, I mean, I don't know how to ask questions about process actually, so this would be a really good point if someone who knows lots about painting and process wants to jump in with a good question. But when you're, oh yes, okay.
I'm going to just go a little bit back to what you said about technique. Well, two things I wanted to say. And I don't want to overcomplicate my question because I don't want to confuse you. But you know when you're saying that you want to work against yourself and you're not that interested in technique, is working against yourself your technique?
Possibly, yeah.
That's what's coming across.
Yeah, possibly, but I think maybe I associate technique with something that can be learned and like developed, and I think what I'm trying to do is maybe an internal negotiation all the time rather than, I think technique has to come into it in some way to like make a painting work, but yeah, that probably is potentially, yeah.
And then the painting like that Isabel is talking about there that you referenced as being you, and then hiding, like, because I was wondering about, I always feel in some of your paintings there's like a blotting out, like the pink part of that one seems like an intentional erasure or a hiding of the thing that's underneath it. And I wonder, like, do you try to use erasure or as a technique? And like, are you intentionally, like, if you're not enjoying how something is going, are you just doing blockouts and then kind of seeing where that takes you?
Yeah, in some ways I think that maybe that idea came from trying to destroy or cover things, and then I kind of realized that it can look quite like effective for maybe what I want to do, and then started using that. But sometimes it's just an accident.
You did mention de Kooning the other day.
Yeah.
In terms of the famous erased de Kooning. That's not like
Oh yeah.
as a gesture. There is a lot of that.
Yeah. I like de Kooning. I think, yeah, it's erasing. I guess I think of it more as like, it sort of expands something for me as well. It's not just erasing. I think it does something else that's
Well, it
beyond
never
that.
is erased. You might work over it, but there's a
Yeah.
history there and a layering, obviously. That
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. And a kind of I guess it's a negation of something, and there was something there. So I like the idea that maybe it's kind of an emotional signifier in some way, that it means something. Yeah. But what that is, I don't know.
And this is a complete change of tack, but one of the things that I'm fascinated by is why the dog in the painting, it's mentality yatter.
Oh, yeah.
Why it's on a 1980s sort of style telephone.
Oh,
Or
yeah.
Is that like, what was the thinking, or was there a thinking there, or did that?
I think it's just the shape of the phone to
Yeah.
me was way more interesting than like a smartphone or an iPhone. And the cords was the main idea that I, for some reason, wanted there to be a wire or a telephone cord. And originally I was thinking it would be the spiral, but it just made more sense with the two phones. And maybe it connects to childhood related
It's
things.
your childhood dog is calling you from the past.
From the phone, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What's he saying? So yeah, the titles. If we could. You talked about Wet Talk, obviously, and then some of the other titles. It was Isoglossia.
Oh
was
yeah, you asked me about that the other day, and I looked it up. That has to do with intercomprehension,
Okay.
which is two people talking, and they have different languages, and they're in dialogue with each other, and they're trying to, or they are speaking. So it's like different tongues, but they're like coming together.
But they're still able to communicate. Which painting is that? Sorry,
this
it's
one.
this one.
It's this
Okay.
one, and there's tongues, and there's like an animal tongue, and then human mouths, and
Yeah.
this idea of like, you know, we talk to animals and they talk to us, but we project onto them, I guess.
And is it? Have you painted dogs before?
Yeah, they're a well-known motif
Okay.
from a long time ago. Yeah.
And do you paint other animals?
I
Or is
have
it-
painted cats and bats.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, so is the dog, like, is the dog nature, is the dog domestication, or is it just
Yeah.
not symbolic? Or
Exactly. No, well, it's a lot of things. I'm
Okay.
aware that it's a lot of things, and
Yeah.
I want to give that, you know. There's kind of, I think there's a generosity in that
Yeah.
idea of a dog, and yes, they're nature, yes, they're domestic, yes, they're anthropomorphized,
Yeah.
and they're wild, and they're,
Kind of bonkers.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and we see them, and like they're everywhere,
Yeah.
yeah, and they're in paintings going all the way back through
It's a
history.
very different kind of dog to the sort of careful sighthound sitting under a table in a Flemish painting there or something. And then I guess going back to the sort of, well, just again, it's just my sort of feeling of the work is another thing that I thought of, like the second I walked out the gallery the other day, is that sort of, because in a way, and this might sound perverse or something, but I think they are kind of representational, because I think they're a much better description of what it feels like to be a human than an awful lot of paintings that I see of humans and what
Thank
it's
you.
like to hang out with a dog, and I live with a dog. So I'm a little bit preoccupied with him. So it made me think about the Andy Warhol quote, which, you know, I never fall apart because I never fall together.
Oh, yeah,
And I
that's
was wondering, the paintings over the years do seem to have gotten, they are exploding more or something. And
Yeah.
I don't know, do you know where that energy is coming from, or?
Yeah, I wonder, I question it. I think I wanted to access it, and I think not be afraid to leave things in that state as well. It's a messiness, you know, and they are kind of falling apart, I hope. And I think that connects to being human and incompleteness and awkwardness. And the messiness is, yeah, it's not, it's intentional, like it's an aesthetic choice.
Is it that there's something, I think also that awkwardness is somehow more generous or more friendly or something? Was that a certain, like, why is that or something? Is that sort of, is it to do with beauty? Is it to do with feeling? Is it a sort of just a, I don't know, I don't have a precise question. I was interested when you started talking about awkwardness, and also actually about the pleasure in awkwardness. Do you have fun when you're making them, or?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, the awkward thing is, like, I used to paint from photos,
Okay.
and when I removed that part of the painting process, things kind of started to like destabilize, and I found it very satisfying. And the awkwardness is a feeling, and it's a feeling in me. I think it's a feeling in everyone.
Yeah.
And that connects to some kind of, also again, to some kind of generosity, I think. And there is some fun in that, because, you know, I want them to be open as the paintings to be open as somebody's making them. And that falls into, fun, pleasure, and making, just like making them in a way where I'm not necessarily a spectator to them as well. So they're
Not really
not really a spectator to what's
Yeah.
happening.
Okay.
And that's fun, where, you know, I'm making them and then I kind of see them later.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really fun. But it's not always fun.
No.
No. And I guess fun can mean, I don't know if you feel like this, fun can be a challenge, it can be many different things. It can,
Well, you talked actually about introducing colours that you found sort of hard to work with, to try and make things to kind of trip yourself up again or something.
Yeah, like the fluorescent orange. Yeah, to try and create a bit of a problem for myself and try to get out of the problem.
You got out too easily by the looks of it.
Thanks.
You're going to have to make it harder for yourself.
Yeah.
So we're at the point now where I'm going to ask if anyone has any questions.
Aileen, when you say you stopped working from photographs when you were doing your painting, what do you work from now? Is it just inside your head?
Yeah, just imagination or responding to whatever else has been put down on the painting. Yeah, sometimes drawings.
Your own drawings?
Hmm?
Your own drawings?
My own drawings, yeah. Yeah.
And the little book of drawings that you've made, that's largely, they're abstract.
Most of
Fundamentally,
them.
are you? Is there a sort of a difference then between drawing and painting in your, like in what it does for you in terms of, I don't know, process?
Yeah, it's much more information finding,
Okay.
thinking, and very sort of a direct sort of channel to a lot of different things. And yeah, the book is funny because the abstract drawings in the book are not really like drawings I'd ever really made before,
Okay.
and connect to the dog on the phone when we were talking about the telephone cords.
Oh, yeah.
And lines of communication, or they could also be like handwriting. Or also sound again, like there's something audible.
Like sound waves even almost or something, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Basically.
The soundtrack.
Yeah.
And I think this is probably my last question, but you mentioned just at the end of our conversation again about, you talked about care and non-care.
Oh
And
yeah.
I'd love to know more about that.
That's a really big part of how I think I can paint. In
Okay.
that I'm quite, and my personality maybe, I don't know if it's fair to say that about myself, if I know myself that well. But I'm really caring towards them, like I care about them deeply, but I have to kind of not care about them to make them. So there's a constant negotiation of that in myself where if I care too much, it can't work.
Okay.
But if I don't care enough, then it starts to all just, I guess they mean less to me. It's like a relationship that is a balancing.
And do you mean when you're talking about caring too much, is that like afraid of ruining it when it gets to a nice point or something, or is it?
A bit of that, and also just going back to wanting it to be good and like
Okay.
pleasing. And I think that ties into a lot of things, like wanting them
Okay.
to function in a certain way, maybe, where
Yeah.
like I kind of have to not care about them a little bit to let them happen.
To let other people see them as well, or?
Yeah, true, yeah. And that's maybe relates to freedom and control and yeah, a lot of different spectrums of like organized and disorganized and stable and destabilizing. If there's a spectrum for all these different things, kind of going up and down. Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Isabel.
Anybody want to jump in for a final question? I was waiting for their glass of wine. I make the usual joke.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay.